Hello, everybody. My name is ERIKA SUSSMAN, and I'm the Executive Director and founder of the Center for Survivor Agency and Justice. And I am here today to kick off a series of spotlights that we are running through our Consumer Rights for Domestic and Sexual Violence Survivors initiative, which is a project of CSAJ. The Consumer Rights for Domestic and Sexual Violence Survivors Initiative is a national project that's been in existence since 2007. And the focus of the project is to enhance the capacity and to build partnerships between domestic violence and consumer rights lawyers and advocates in order to enhance economic justice for survivors. Part of our Consumer Rights Project that has been really critical work involves our demonstration and pilot site work. And that pilot site work has been very context specific and has led us to understand the need to share broad strategies and the scope of survivor-centered economic advocacy work that's happening in many spaces throughout the country in very exciting ways. People are doing such incredible, impactful work in so many different ways, and the spotlights are an effort to share that work so that we can learn from one another and adapt the work to our own contexts and settings. And that really is why we're here today, to share that work and to build best practices in consumer and economic advocacy with the field at large. Today's spotlight is focused on the work of a really incredible project at the Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. And to do introductions of themselves, I'm really thrilled and privileged to hand it over to Carla Sanchez-Adams, as well as Stephanie James, who are joining us to talk with us about your incredible work.
Hi, I'm Carla Sanchez-Adams, and I'm a managing attorney at the Survivor-Centered Economic Advocacy team that is a part of a victims' rights group within Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. We are about a year and a half old. We started off as a project back in 2013, and then we turned it into a team. And we provide survivor-centered holistic services trying to achieve economic security for victims of crime, including domestic violence survivors and sexual assault survivors.
Hello, my name is Stephanie James, and I work as an attorney at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid under the Equal Justice Work Crime Victims Justice Corps Fellowship, and I am based out of the office here in El Paso, Texas. And prior to starting this fellowship in June, my primary focus was practicing family law. And so now I am providing direct representation to vulnerable populations in the areas of identity theft. And I also take on cases where there are other consumer issues involved.
Do you want to go ahead and sort of briefly articulate the purpose of your survivor-centered economic advocacy project?
Sure. So, like I mentioned before, back in 2013, the project began more informally, and it happened as a result of observations that I made. I originally practiced family law as well, and I saw that there was this gap between the types of relief and remedies available to victims of domestic violence and sexual assault within the context of economic justice. And so particularly, even though family law would provide certain remedies in a divorce decree, for example, it would be much more limited when there wasn't a marriage, and of course in the context of just getting a protective order. But in either case, there was a lot of problems and a lot of economic abuse that resulted within the relationship that wasn't able to be addressed through family law. since I was also a consumer law advocate, I realized that there were remedies available within that area of law. And so I decided to kind of meld the two together and prioritize cases where mostly women had experienced economic abuse, and it's kind of how it got up and running.
It's impressive. So if you could talk a little bit about how you got from the impetus to really create the project to institutionalizing it within your legal aid organization. I think that would be really helpful to many of us who are thinking about doing similar things.
Sure. So at the beginning, I think a big part of it was stressing that there were numbers, that there were cases, that this was something that also should be a priority, and how it differed from general consumer work, and also why the family law wasn't equipped to deal with some of these kind of challenges. So within our organization, our largest team really is our family team, the group itself. And then that is the majority of our intakes as well, is family related legal issues. The second most voluminous is consumer, but the team is significantly smaller. And the way that we function, which is a little different than some traditional legal aids, is that we are actually specialists. So as opposed to whatever comes into the office, the attorneys that are in that geographic area take anything within that geographic area. With us, we're split up into teams. And so an attorney who's in Austin, like for example, me, can take a case that is 5 hours away because it's the kind of case that the team would look at. And so because of that, there's some benefits and some challenges, but within our existing structure, kind of leveraging the fact that these cases exist, they were falling through the cracks and they're a priority, and having a track record. So it did take, like I said, from 2013 to 2016, 2017 to where it became formalized as its own team, just showing here are the cases, here's the success, and building that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I would think that that kind of conversation around restructuring, there sometimes meets resistance for folks when they're used to operating in a particular way. So is there more that you can speak to around that kind of that shift in how you made that happen? Where did those conversations take place? Yeah.
Sure. So part of it, I think, is understanding in some ways who the persons in your organization who you need to be on your side and championing you are, and really connecting with them. So for example, we are, as I mentioned before, under the victims' rights group, and that was established after we got some funding and a project specifically to help provide civil legal services to survivors of sexual assault. And so the group coordinator for that had been someone that I had been speaking to for years, kind of about the work that I was doing, and she was really interested in it. So she's not a subject area expert in the consumer aspect, but she is as far as working with victims. And knowing that it's something that she wanted to be able to provide in order to achieve holistic care for our clients was really important. So pitching that to someone who's already working with this clientele and saying, we're just coming in alongside and supplementing the already great work that you're doing, but that is additional and necessary to really achieving security for the survivors. One of the things that I learned was to, how do I say this well, kind of fill in the gaps, and then also reach out to, like, this sounds maybe a buzzword, but power players, right? So that would be the manager or group coordinator, whoever, and kind of say, this is what we're thinking. This is a priority. Are you guys already doing these cases? If you're not, if you're not prioritizing them, then we'd love to. So in some ways, it came alongside, and in certain teams, there were managers who said, we really have expertise in this area. We would prefer these cases to come to us first. And so part of that meant either recruiting someone who was already on that team to also be on our team, or it meant, so it would go to their team first, and then if they couldn't take it, they'd pitch it back to us. and we would see if we could take it and kind of learn and have one of the team, that particular team mentor us and learning some of the basics of that. And in other ways, it meant just letting them keep it and coming alongside and supplementing off. Like, we didn't have to be experts in anything, but we could, if we wanted to learn that area, we would, I think that no managing attorney will ever turn down warm bodies. So if somebody's like, I want to learn this area and take this area, as it pertains to survivors, you'll very rarely hear a no. And then, so it was just really learning, okay, which managers want to first get it there, which managers kind of want to get rid of it and give it to you. And so working within that context and saying, kind of figuring out the next step based on their responses. If you notice, one of the things that I've noticed is in a lot of legal aid offices, they won't touch the FCRA, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, with a 10-foot pole because they just don't know about it. So if those are cases that you can take, then you take those and then say, okay, but they're also related to housing or maybe employment. And so then working with those teams as well and saying, if you guys see these issues, I know you see these issues, send them to us, and then we'll work with you on the other cases. And so it really is just kind of learning and talking and dialoguing and like really stressing that you're wanting to help. And when you frame it that way, people want your help.
So I'm wondering if you can say a little bit more about sort of the partnership piece of your work, because I know that your project is very much focused on those partnerships. So can you talk a little bit more about what partnerships you have developed and how it benefits the work that you do and the survivors with whom you work?
And, we have partnerships with 68 shelters all over our state. We have countries in our kind of our traditional TRLA legal aid region, as well as Northwest Texas that we just expanded a couple of years ago, and that's 114 additional counties. So there's a lot of work to be done. And we have intake that happens through those shelters, rape crisis shelters, domestic violence shelters, and they will come to us, as well as through internally our teams that are, whether it's our family law team or other consumer teams like housing, mortgage foreclosure, or even tax, because we help on innocent spouse cases as well. So we get cases from within our organization, from our partners, as well as through our general hotline and intake. And from there, it's really a case-by-case scenario, seeing what the problems are, what the possible solutions are. And in addition to that, we do have, again, within our existing structure of our organization, having task forces, for example, that were already established in the context or area of family law, coming alongside, joining some of those, being present and explaining we're also doing this work, as well as other statewide organizations. So Texas Council on Family Violence, Texas Appleseed, Texas Legal Services Center, as well as Professor Angie Litwin, who's at UT, kind of forming a network of people who are working within this area and talking about our experiences, what's working, what's not working, challenges. And part of that also goes to, within the broader context of people who are advocates in general of these client populations, being able to say, this is an issue that you can spot, and this is something that you can help with, and you can refer, and there's help, and there's already a network of people who are working on this issue, so don't feel like there's nothing that can be done about it. And so it's a great way. It's a kind of a portion of education and awareness that comes from those existing partnerships, and kind of getting it on the radar so that it grows slowly and exponentially.
So I really do think that the partnerships we have is perhaps the most important thing that we have going for us right now in terms of how we are receiving these cases. TRLA has partnerships with about 68 service providers throughout the state of Texas. And we provide training to shelter advocates on how to screen for these cases. Work really closely with those shelter partners. We have an annual conference where we train advocates on a variety of legal issues, just so that they know how to screen for these issues. and not just for the immediate concerns that someone may have, which of course are the most important: physical safety, protective orders, divorces, stuff like that. They're also screening for housing issues, consumer issues, everything else.
So I want to talk a little bit more, digging into the context part, because we know that so much of how we do this type of work depends on context, depends on sort of where you are, what your organization looks like, what your community looks like, what the state looks like. And so context really, really does matter. Can you share a little bit about how context has mattered in your own work, and how you've sort of had to adjust a little bit along the way to be responsive to that context?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. Mostly because we are so diverse, because our state is quite large and our service area is very large. We have, rural and urban. We have a lot of Spanish speakers, and then we have, especially in our border regions, there are what are called, the credit invisibles, right? Because they've never had credit before, and so there are different challenges, and some that are, have been in the a lot of them are also, not born in the U.S., and so they may be U.S. citizens, or they may be LPRs, but they don't have, they're not second generation or third generation Americans, and so even their knowledge of the financial system is very different than somebody who's been born here, raised here, parents were born and raised here. It really is. I mean, you can have two clients that have very similar stories but are in two different regions, and the approach is going to be different depending on that. And also, of course, with their backgrounds and their priorities, because we are survivor-centered, it really is driven by them. And so if they have different values and priorities, then it's going to be different. So it really is something that isn't kind of cookie cutter, isn't going to work the same in every situation, and that's made us have to be more creative, and it means it's not boring work. So
sure. I try to identify really where that person is on her journey, right? She may have other goals that she's prioritizing, and that really forms, it really gives her the decision of, whether she wants to help address these issues now, or whether she just wants advice and information so that she can help resolve these issues in the future. So really context in terms of identifying where these individuals are in their journeys really forms the basis for the types of services that we provide, which can be, from counsel and advice, limited representation, just helping her pull her credit reports, or direct representation.
And you, Stephanie, are located, where is your office again, as we're thinking about?
In El Paso. Yeah, in El Paso, Texas. So we are a border city. Most of our clients are Spanish-speaking clients. So that also, as well, forms and dictates, the types of services, and making sure that all of the materials are in both English and Spanish is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That, I think, leads us to thinking about specifically how we infuse survivor-centered approaches into our work, how you have centered the voices of survivors in the way that your program operates, and any thoughts that you have about how you can enhance that in the future.
can you describe what you mean by centering the voice of survivor?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose there can be lots of different ways of describing that, but what I'm thinking about is really ensuring that survivors' needs and priorities are driving the advocacy process, and that program, that's from an individual advocacy perspective. From a sort of program perspective, I'm thinking about, you know, how do we make sure that the way we design our programs and carry out our programs is also responsive to what we're hearing from survivors, and being accountable to that voice.
One of the really amazing benefits that we have is such a strong and robust team that already exists, like that big victim rights group that we have, and specific training that we've received, kind of all of the advocates have received on being trauma informed and on being survivor centered. And so it's something that when we're talking with our clients, when we're interacting with them, it's at the forefront of our mind. Like, what does it mean to be, you know, trauma informed and survivor centered? And one of the amazing things that I learned a couple of years ago, I'm 3 or 4, I don't actually remember, but was the fact that trauma rewires the brain. And that means that when you're talking to your clients, they may not remember the issues, and having them say, I don't remember, and then realizing that as they're reliving this or talking about this, they're reliving the trauma, and it's re-traumatizing them. And it's all wrapped up in not just the economic portion, but as well as if there was physical abuse or sexual abuse or with the children, all of that is wrapped up. And taking a moment to being sensitive to that and seeing, okay, you know, do you want to take a break? Do we want to focus on something else? Is with everything that's going on, is this something that you really want to work on right now? Or do you want to focus on something else? So, you know, making sure that they really drive the process. For example, I've had clients that are in the process of a divorce. Then we have a case open with them. We were helping them defend a lawsuit that they were sued on as a result of a business debt that the husband owned, but they were suing her in her individual capacity as well. And then also had some tax problems because of him. So there were several layers of problems that existed as a result of this abusive relationship. And so, you know, she would have to go to court for one thing and then another thing. And it was really making sure, okay, how is this affecting you? Are you able to go to work? Are you able, you know, what about the kids? And so trying to work with her, prioritize with her, making sure that we weren't adding stress onto her already, you know, stressful situation. And so we do talk about it in an individual level, but it really informs the bigger picture, because learning how to do it with an individual means we really need to make sure that this is a practice that is followed across the board.
Given the kind of groundbreaking effort that you've been engaged in creating, I am sure that you have many, many lessons that you can share from your own work. Can you offer up a story or share a critical turning point maybe around your project and work, and what other gems might you have to share with folks in terms of lessons learned that they might want to consider in doing some similar work?
One of the things that has been really interesting to learn is that there are really amazing tools that we have that we really need to be learning about, not just on the federal level, but on a state level. And so there are things that, like, for example, we have a declaratory judgment in one of our statutes that is a very simple tool that you can just file a lawsuit having a judge declare whether or not a party was a party to a contract. So that's one thing we can do. When our clients have been sued, we have this other really nifty part of our statute that says you can bring claims that would have otherwise been expired because of statute of limitations issues. You can bring them within 30 days of the answer due date. So if our clients had Truth in Lending Act claims through the Fair Credit Billing Act, or maybe an FDCPA claim or something, but we couldn't bring it, now we can. And so there's just some of like knowing your local rules, your state law, as well as federal law is really helpful. And really like networking and leveraging the relationships you already have is something like, I didn't have to build this from the ground up. I just came alongside, and that was amazing. And so I'm just building on the work that was already done by people before me. And hopefully when I leave, there'll be people who will come in and it'll be a lot easier for them as well. They're just building on our work. Of course, one of the challenges in family law is if the opponent doesn't have money and the abuser doesn't have money, what's going to happen? But with the kind of work that we do, if we can leverage it around financial institutions, then we don't have that problem. We have deeper pockets that we can go after, which is giving hope and money and doing something that otherwise wouldn't be able to do in other type of work. And I know that it's kind of a little bit outside, but of that kind of your question, but just those things, learning that, and also learning that the beginning it's hard going because it's such a broad area, but once you start doing it, you build a rhythm, like the learning curve is smaller, and you have a lot of different tools and remedies to pick from, and being creative can sound overwhelming, but the more that you do it, the more you kind of find your rhythm. And I know Stephanie has some stuff she wants to add in too.
Wonderful.
The biggest lesson that I've learned just in terms of being, having practiced a little bit of family law, being an advocate in the sense of family law, in the context of family law, where I'm helping a client with a protective order, with a divorce, custody issues, and I need to hear a lot of the details of the domestic violence, and being an advocate in terms of economic advocate has been a transition for me. So the most important lesson that I've learned is in trying to provide holistic services to our clients, I really need to take a step back and then realize, okay, does she feel comfortable in discussing the violence with me? And more importantly, do I really need this information to be able to provide the services that I need to provide? Because the last thing that I want to do, of course, is to re-traumatize her. So that's been the most important lesson. In the month and a half, 2 months that I've started doing economic advocacy, is just kind of taking a step back, and then kind of seeing my role a bit different now as an economic advocate.
But CSAJ's materials and presentations and webinar, all of those things, it's so helpful because on the one hand, you guys do the research and have the numbers. And so when I was pitching our team, having your study, just showing, look, this is, in 99% of cases where there's been domestic violence, there's also economic abuse. So having kind of an academic approach to it that is already there, as well as materials like your screening tools, not having to reinvent the wheel. So it's not really a waste of, it's not a waste, but what I'm saying, a drain on our resources or time, because the materials already exist and they're already there and they're fantastic. So why reinvent the wheel? And having, just when I talked about leveraging those networks, I mean, CSAJ is definitely one of them. And then of course, in other areas, the National Consumer Law Center, just going, not having to feel like I have to do it all and be the expert in all. And like,
yeah, I appreciate that. I think that that is part of the collaboration brilliance that you have brought to this work, thinking very broadly about, how to partner in efficient ways and effective ways, and ways that do not duplicate, but actually really enhance what it is that you're doing. And of course, having an openness to that kind of cross-learning, because your work and the work of folks in the field is what creates, for example, CSAJ's work. We draw upon those insights to build our insights, and then hopefully our insights feed back to what you're able to achieve. So really having that, that web is critical to doing this work. Do you have a particular area of focus that you're looking at in the coming months and years, and what steps are you taking to organize in that direction?
Yes, we are really excited about the opportunity to form a coalition around coerced debt in particular. And so it's something that we're doing informally, and now we're going to try to formalize through a statewide coalition. And part of that is kind of, as you were talking about, is bringing more people to collaborate together, those that traditionally don't, as well as financial institutions. So, banks, credit unions and law enforcement, and really kind of talking about the dynamic of coerced debt, the reality, the impact, and trying to you know, educate and inform systems responses within our organization in particular. Because we are LSC funded, we are not able to do any kind of policy or you know, lobbying or things like that, but there are organizations that we partner with that can. And so being a resource as far as this is what we're seeing on the ground with the existing law, the successes and the challenges, and informing them and their approach to being able to achieve systematic change where necessary. And then of course, just wanting to really, you know, that they're expand in some areas that we're not already doing. So within coerced debt and identity theft, sometimes there's tangential issues like problems with public benefits, like Social Security, or problems with driver's license or tickets or fines. And so trying to expand in some of the areas that we're not already you know, familiar with, to really continue that kind of holistic piece. And so you know, in some cases we have an expunction, like on one client, one of our advocates working on an expunction. And so that isn't traditionally within something we've done, but we're exploring that, because if that's going to impact her ability to get housing, then we want to, you know, explore everything. So just continue to grow to be able to give better services to our clients is really kind of on the kind of big ground and individual, you know, top up and individual level.
I want to say to everybody who has listened into the spotlight and watched today that we are very happy to engage you on any questions that come from this spotlight. If there's more that you want to learn about this project or any of the subsequent spotlights, or just the Consumer Rights Project in general, we welcome you to get in touch with us. We have an email address, which is info@csaj.org, and you can reach us there. And again, this is the first of a whole series of spotlights that we'll be featuring, so we welcome you to plug in the future and learn more about some other great work that is being done. So with that, I want to thank both of you, Carla and Stephanie, for all that you brought today and all that you bring to your work every day. Thank you so much. And
you guys for the work that y'all do as well.
Oh, thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right, take good care.